Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to a new episode of Pakistan Zindabad. Today, we are here with Season 1, Episode 38. Counter-Terrorism, De-Radicalization, and Internal Stability. How Muslim NATO defeats extremism without destroying societies. This episode is drawn from the book The Nuclear Umbrella, written by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir. The book clearly highlights a fundamental point. Terrorism cannot be defeated by bullets alone. It requires dismantling the mindset, the funding, and the systems that sustain it. Muslim NATO's approach is not limited to security alone. It moves forward while upholding human dignity, the rule of law, and social stability. Today's episode is built on this very principle. Defeat extremism, but do not sacrifice your society.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. In today's deep dive, we are looking at episode 38 of the book, The Nuclear Umbrella, written by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir.
It is wonderful to be back. And we're diving into something today that feels, well, it feels incredibly weighty.
It really does. I was reading through the source material, and this isn't just another chapter.
Not at all. It feels more like a systematic dismantling of how we've thought about security for, the last 20 years?
Absolutely. The title of this section alone gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about. Counter-terrorism, de-radicalization, and internal stability.
It's a huge scope.
But looking at the source material, this episode 38, it feels like we're looking at a manual for a machine that hasn't been built yet.
But desperately needs to be. That's a very apt way to put it.
And for you listening, to give you some context, this is categorized within Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir's work as Volume 4 Blueprint Series, Episode 26.
And that word blueprint, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
It really is.
We aren't discussing history here. We aren't just analyzing the past. It's a forward-looking architecture. This is the proposed operational doctrine for how a hypothetical Muslim NATO would actually function.
On the ground.
On the ground to defeat extremism.
And, the core promise of this text is what really hooked me immediately.
Yeah.
It's trying to answer a question that I think most military leaders, most politicians are terrified to even ask out loud.
Which is?
How does a Muslim NATO defeat extremism without destroying the very societies it is trying to save?
That's the paradox of modern warfare, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, we've all heard the phrase, we had to destroy the village to save it. Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir is arguing for a complete inversion of that logic.
And there's a central thesis here, a hook, that just anchors the entire argument. I think we should start there. The quote is, "Terrorism cannot be bombed out of existence."
It sounds almost deceptively simple when you say it like that. Terrorism cannot be bombed out of existence. But if you really sit with that sentence for a minute, it basically invalidates, 90% of the global counterterrorism strategy from the last 2 decades?
I was thinking the exact same thing. Because the standard response has always been, find the bad guy, drop a bomb, declare victory, and move on.
Exactly. And the text really digs into why that fails so spectacularly. You can bomb a building, sure. You can destroy a training camp.
You can even eliminate a charismatic leader with a drone strike.
Yes, all of that. But you cannot airstrike an idea. You can't bomb a grievance. It's impossible. And if you try to use kinetic force, explosives, heavy military hardware to solve a problem that is fundamentally rooted in ideology and sociology,
you're just making it worse.
You are. The text suggests it's like trying to do gardening by just cutting the heads off the weeds while you're aggressively watering the roots. The problem will always grow back, and probably stronger.
That leads to this fascinating concept in the source material called the two victims. I think this is so important for setting the stage.
It is.
Because usually when we talk about a terror attack, we focus on the immediate tragedy, the loss of life, the physical destruction.
And rightly so. I mean, those are the primary victims, and we should never lose sight of that. But episode 38 argues that we have to look wider.
It says every attack has a second victim.
The society itself. The explosion kills people, yes. But the aftermath kills social cohesion.
That's a powerful way to put it.
It breaks the trust between neighbors. It causes the government to panic and implement these draconian laws that erode civil liberties. It creates an atmosphere of suspicion and fear.
So the terrorists' real goal isn't just the body count. It's the social breakdown that follows.
Precisely. That's the grand prize for them. The terrorist wants the state to overreact. They want the society to turn on itself, to fragment along sectarian or ethnic lines.
So with all that in mind, the mission statement of this Muslim NATO doctrine becomes incredibly specific and, frankly, very ambitious.
It is. The book states it as, defeat terror while preserving faith, dignity, and social cohesion.
It's not enough to just win the gunfight.
No.
You have to win the gunfight in a way that doesn't rot the soul of the nation you're trying to protect.
That is the perfect way to frame it. That's the entire challenge.
Okay, so before we get into the how, the solution Mr. Muir proposes, we need to spend some time on the why. Section 1 of our outline is effectively an autopsy of failure. I mean, we've been fighting the war on terror globally for decades. Trillions of dollars have been spent. Millions of lives impacted. Why hasn't it worked perfectly? What does the book identify as the root causes of this systemic failure?
The source material is very, very unsparing here. It doesn't pull any punches. It breaks the failure down into specific structural errors. The first one it points to is over-militarization.
Using a hammer for a problem that requires a scalpel.
Exactly that. Just think about the optics for a second. If you roll tanks and armored personnel carriers into a civilian neighborhood to catch, say, a handful of insurgents, what message are you sending?
You're sending the message that everyone there is a potential enemy.
You're telling thousands of innocent people, you live in a war zone, you are occupied. It completely alienates the population. And in counterterrorism, the local population is your single most valuable asset.
They're your eyes and ears.
They are. And if they stop trusting you, you effectively go blind. You have no intelligence.
Which connects directly to the second point the book makes, indiscriminate force.
This is the ugliest part of the legacy, really. Collateral damage. When a military strategy accepts that it's okay to harm or kill civilians to get to a target, you are doing the terrorist recruitment work for them.
For free.
For free. The text makes this point very clearly. Harming civilians doesn't just breed resentment. That resentment is the fuel. It's the gasoline on the fire.
You can see how that would happen.
Yeah.
A young person who sees their innocent family member hurt or killed by the state,
Sure.
They don't look at the state as a protector anymore.
They look for a weapon. They look for revenge. It's a deeply human reaction.
So it's a self-defeating cycle. You might kill one terrorist, but you end up creating 3 new ones in the process.
And the cycle just continues. Now, the third point in this autopsy is foreign design doctrines. This one is really interesting because it speaks to ideas of sovereignty and culture.
Right, it's not a one-size-fits-all problem.
It creates a massive disconnect. You cannot simply take a counterterrorism manual written in, say, a Pentagon boardroom or a European think tank and just drop it into a tribal region of Pakistan or a complex urban environment in the Middle East and expect it to work.
It's like trying to run software on an incompatible operating system.
That's a great analogy. The cultural context is different, the religious dynamics are different, the social hierarchies, everything is different. The source material argues that these imported strategies failed because they ignored the soil, they tried to plant a seed that simply could not grow there.
And because that software was incompatible, as you said, it led to the 4th major failure, neglect. The focus was entirely on the kinetic, the shooting, while completely ignoring the roots of the problem.
We ignored the ideology that was driving the violence. And just as importantly, we ignored the financing that enabled it. We were so focused on the trigger puller that we forgot about the person who radicalized him and the person who paid for the bullets.
And finally, there's what the book calls the post-operation gap. This is the one that I think frustrates people the most when they watch the news. The army goes in, clears an area, the flags are waved, and then what?
And then, usually, silence. The military moves on to the next objective. But if there's no plan for healing, no plan for rebuilding the schools, for restoring the economy, for political reconciliation, a vacuum forms.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
It certainly does. If the state doesn't fill that vacuum with stability and hope, the extremists will always rush back in and fill it with chaos and their own twisted version of order.
So, to synthesize it all, the result of these old models is what the book calls temporary calm, but long-term instability.
That's it. You buy yourself a month, maybe 6 months of quiet, but you pay for it with a decade of turmoil down the line.
A terrible bargain.
The worst.
Okay, so we know it doesn't work. The hammer approach doesn't work. Let's look at what Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir proposes instead. Section 2 of the episode introduces the 4-pillar framework.
Yes. And he doesn't call it a strategy or a plan. He calls it a counter-terrorism ecosystem.
I really appreciate that term, ecosystem. It sounds more biological than mechanical.
It is, and I think that's intentional. In an ecosystem, every part is connected. If you remove one element, the whole thing can collapse. So these four pillars aren't a menu where you can just pick and choose what you feel like doing today.
You have to do all of them, all at once.
Simultaneously and continuously.
So let's break them down. Pillar 1 is precision kinetics. Now, wait a minute. We just spent the last 5 minutes bashing over-militarization. How is this different?
It's different because of the intent and the method. The doctrine isn't naive. It acknowledges that there are some people you just cannot talk to. There are hardened threats, ideologues who need to be neutralized physically.
Right.
But precision kinetics means targeted, intelligence-led operations.
So no tanks rolling through the streets.
No tanks. No F-16s dropping bombs on apartment buildings. This is the domain of highly trained special forces, working with precise, real-time intelligence to conduct surgical strikes. The goal, as the book puts it, is to remove the tumor without damaging the surrounding healthy tissue.
And the strategic purpose of that is to minimize collateral damage.
Which allows the state to keep the moral high ground. It's crucial. If the community sees that you are being incredibly careful with their lives, they will remain on your side.
Okay, that makes sense. Pillar 2 seems to be the one that is most unique to this whole Muslim NATO concept. It's called ideological neutralization.
This is the core differentiator. It's the game changer. You cannot fight a religious distortion with a purely secular argument. It simply does not land.
It's like you're speaking two different languages.
Exactly. If a terrorist is convinced, truly convinced, that God wants him to commit violence, explaining to him that his actions violate the Geneva Convention is, well, it's useless. He doesn't care about the Geneva Convention. He cares about his interpretation of Scripture.
So how does the Muslim NATO doctrine, as proposed here, actually handle this?
By using credible scholarship to counter distortions. The doctrine calls for mobilizing learned, respected Islamic scholars, the ulema, who can dismantle the extremist narrative from within the Islamic tradition itself.
So they're not attacking the religion.
They're defending it. They prove, using theology, using history, using jurisprudence, that the terrorists' actions are not just wrong, they are religiously invalid. They are perversion of the faith.
So you're fighting fire with water, rather than just fighting fire with more fire.
Or, to put it another way, you're fighting a lie with the truth. It strips the terrorist of their self-proclaimed holy warrior costume and reveals them for what they really are, criminals who are violating the very faith they claim to defend.
Yeah, it is incredibly powerful. Let's move to Pillar 3, financial disruption. This feels like the unsexy bureaucratic side of war.
Yes. It's the spreadsheets and the bank transfers.
But it's probably one of the most effective tools.
It's the oxygen of terror, as the book calls it. You can have the most compelling ideology in the world, but if you can't buy bullets, if you can't put gas in the truck, if you can't pay for the internet connection to upload your propaganda videos, you're finished.
So what does the text actually say about how to do this?
It calls for choking funding, logistics, and laundering. And this isn't simple. It involves highly sophisticated tracking of money flows, not just through formal banks, but through informal networks, hawala systems, and now, increasingly, cryptocurrency.
It's about making the entire business of terrorism bankrupt.
Exactly. You make it too expensive and too difficult to operate.
And finally, that brings us to Pillar 4, community resilience.
This is the long game. This is the generational work. It covers rehabilitation, reintegration, and most importantly, prevention.
It's about building a society that is fundamentally immune to the virus of extremism.
That's the perfect analogy. If a recruiter for a terror group walks into a community that is educated, that is employed, where people have hope and social cohesion, he finds no recruits. The community itself rejects him.
It's like a societal immune system.
Precisely. You are strengthening the body so it can fight off the infection all by itself without needing constant military intervention.
These 4 pillars, kinetics, ideology, finance, and community, they all clearly feed into each other. But they need a brain, a central nervous system.
They need a place to live.
And that brings us to Section 3 of the material, the operational hub. The text calls it the JCTC.
The Joint Counter-Terrorism Center.
And there's a specific geographical detail here that I found very telling. The source material describes it as a Pakistan-hosted core with regional nodes.
It's a significant detail, and I don't think it's accidental. It acknowledges Pakistan's unique position in this fight.
So,
Well, you could argue that Pakistan has paid a heavier price in the war on terror than almost any other nation. But through that trial by fire, it has also developed a level of expertise, of resilience, of operational know-how, that is. Well, it's unmatched.
So by placing the core of the JCTC there, the Muslim NATO alliance is leveraging that hard-won experience.
Exactly. You put your best player at the center of the field.
So let's visualize this JCTC. Let's imagine the building. What is actually happening inside on a day-to-day basis?
It's an operational hive. The text is very clear and lists specific functions. The first, and maybe the most important, is cross-border threat tracking.
Ah, the border problem.
Terrorists love borders. They hit a target in one country and then they slip across the border to rest and refit in another, knowing full well the police and army can't easily follow them.
It's a jurisdiction nightmare for law enforcement.
A total nightmare. The JCTC is designed to solve that. It ensures that the eyes on the target don't blink just because he crossed an invisible line on a map.
And to do that, you would need shared watch lists.
Absolutely essential. If a dangerous individual is identified in, say, Turkey, the border guards in Pakistan or Malaysia or Egypt need to know about it instantly, not a day later, not an hour later, instantly. We're talking about real-time data integration.
And the book also mentions joint planning cells.
This is about breaking down the silos. Instead of every country's intelligence agency planning its own little war in secret, you have strategists from across the alliance sitting at the same table, looking at the same map, planning together. It harmonizes the entire strategy.
The source also brings up training and standards.
This is about interoperability. It's critical. You want to ensure that a special ops team from country A operates with the same discipline, the same human rights standards, and the same tactics as a team from country B. It professionalizes the entire allied force.
So everyone speaks the same operational language.
Exactly, and that leads to the final function, after-action learning.
The feedback loop.
The feedback loop. If a raid goes wrong, you don't bury the report to save someone's career. You study it. You analyze it mercilessly. You learn from it immediately so that no one else makes that same mistake again.
There's a motto, a kind of golden rule for the JCTC mentioned in episode 38. It says, act together, share outcomes, protect sources.
And that last part, protect sources, is arguably the most critical part of that phrase.
Why is that?
Because intelligence agencies are naturally paranoid. And for good reason. They hoard their secrets because they are terrified that if they share information, their human sources on the ground will get exposed and killed.
So they don't share.
And the whole system grinds to a halt. This doctrine proposes building a framework of trust in technology where sharing is safe. If you can absolutely guarantee that the source is protected, you unlock a flood of intelligence that was previously locked away in a dozen different silos.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. We've talked about the hardware, the finance, the strategy. Now let's talk about the human beings at the center of this. Section 4 is all about de-radicalization and rehabilitation.
This is where the doctrine really moves beyond just security and into the realm of societal healing. It's about breaking the recruitment cycle.
The source calls it breaking recruitment cycles permanently, which is a bold claim because the current prison system in most places, well, it doesn't exactly rehabilitate, does it?
No. In many cases, prisons are effectively universities for extremism.
That's a scary thought.
It is. You put a confused, angry young person in a cell with a hardened, charismatic ideologue, and 2 years later, you release a fully formed monster back into society. The Muslim NATO doctrine proposes a radical departure from this failed model.
And it starts with scholar-led counseling.
Again, you see how it ties back to the ideological pillar. You need someone who can speak the language of faith to sit down with these individuals day after day and carefully deconstruct their programming. It's a form of cognitive therapy, but with a solid theological foundation.
But it's not just about the prisoner in isolation. The text puts a huge emphasis on family and community involvement.
Because you cannot heal someone in a vacuum. If you rehabilitate a person and then send them back to a family that doesn't understand them or a community that shuns them, they will almost certainly relapse.
It's setting them up to fail.
It is. You need the mother involved. You need the father involved. You need the local community leaders and the imam of the local mosque to create a genuine pathway for their return.
And practical pathways, too. The book specifies education and skills pathways.
Right. You cannot eat ideology.
Yeah.
Many people fall into extremism not just for belief, but for economic desperation. They're offered a salary, status, a purpose. If you can offer a tangible alternative, a trade, a skill, a real job, you remove that powerful economic incentive for terror.
But the text isn't naive about this. It also mentions monitored reintegration.
Trust but verify. It's a graduated system. You don't just open the gate and say, good luck out there. You watch, you support, you provide check-ins, and you verify that the rehabilitation is actually holding.
I also want to touch on the idea of victim-centric justice that's mentioned here. It seems like an important piece of the puzzle.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's incredibly important. It is so easy to get focused on fixing the terrorist that we completely forget the people they hurt.
The victims and their families.
Yes. This doctrine argues that you must acknowledge their pain. Justice must not only be done, but it must be seen to be done. If the victims feel abandoned or ignored by the state, they lose faith in the system. They might even be tempted to take the law into their own hands.
So it's this incredibly delicate balance between showing mercy to the perpetrator who wants to change and delivering justice for the victim who has suffered.
It is the hardest balance to strike in any justice system, but it is absolutely essential for long-term peace and reconciliation.
This leads us perfectly into Section 5, legitimacy as a weapon. This is a concept that Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir explores that I found really counterintuitive at first.
I can see why.
Because usually, when things get dangerous, the public instinct is to say, take the gloves off, forget the rules.
Do whatever it takes. We hear that phrase all the time in movies and political speeches. But Episode 38 argues that actually legitimacy is a force multiplier.
A force multiplier, that's a military term. It's usually used for a piece of technology like night vision goggles or a new weapon that makes a small force much more effective. How is legitimacy a force multiplier?
Think about it this way. In an insurgency or a counter-terror operation, the people, the population, they are the terrain, they're the battlefield.
Okay.
If the people believe the state is acting legally, morally, and justly, they will help the state. They become your eyes and ears. They will provide the tips that stop the bomb from ever going off. Their support multiplies your force.
And if the state acts illegitimately, if it bends the rules?
If the state starts to kidnap suspects or torture people for information or denies due process, then the state becomes indistinguishable from the criminal gang it claims to be fighting. The people stop helping, they go silent. They might even start actively hiding the terrorists.
You lose the terrain.
You've lost the entire war, even if you're winning the small battles.
So the safeguards listed in the text, things like due process, proportional use of force, judicial oversight, humane detention standards, clear rules of engagement, these aren't just, liberal niceties.
They are tactical necessities. They are strategic weapons in your arsenal. A soldier who follows clear rules of engagement is a more disciplined and more effective soldier than one who's just acting on rage. A court system that provides oversight prevents the kind of corruption that rots a security force from the inside out.
It effectively sends the message, we are better than them, and we will prove it by how we conduct ourselves, even in the face of their barbarism.
Exactly. You defeat the monster without becoming the monster in the process.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of theory. Now, let's see it in action. Section 6 of the source material provides wargaming scenarios. 3 specific crisis scenarios that show how this whole Muslim NATO doctrine would actually respond in the real world.
These are great because they take all of these abstract pillars we've been talking about and they put them into motion. You can see how the machine works.
Let's start with scenario A, transnational terror cell. This is the classic movie plot, right? A group of bad guys operating across 3 different countries, all planning a big, coordinated attack.
And in the old model, this is an absolute nightmare for intelligence agencies. Country A has some of the intel, Country B has a different piece of the puzzle, and Country C is completely clueless. They don't talk to each other effectively.
And the terrorists just slip through the cracks.
Every time. Now, how does the Muslim NATO JCCC model handle this? The response is built on one concept, fused intel, meaning the JCTC acts as a central hub. It pulls the data streams from all 3 countries into one single, coherent picture. For the first time, they can see the whole network, not just little pieces of it.
And the strike, when it comes.
It's all about synchronized arrests. You don't hit the safe house in Lahore today and then the one in Istanbul next week. That just gives them time to scatter. You hit all of them at the exact same minute. The terrorists have no time to warn each other. They literally have nowhere to run.
But the text says it's not just physical arrests, is it?
No, and this is key. At the exact same moment, the doors are being kicked in, the financial nodes are frozen, their bank accounts, their crypto wallets, any front companies, all locked instantly.
Wow.
And simultaneously, their propaganda channels, their websites, their social media accounts, their messaging apps are taken down. It is a total system shock. You blind them, you bankrupt them, and you capture them all at once.
That is incredibly impressive. Now, scenario B. This is the one that I think keeps intelligence directors awake at night. The lone actor radicalization spike.
The guy alone in his room.
Yes. No network, no phone calls to Syria, just a kid and an internet connection going down a rabbit hole of hate online.
This is the hardest target to stop because there's no cell to infiltrate. But the doctrine has a plan for this too, and it starts with early online detection.
This sounds a little like surveillance.
It's more about monitoring the public digital space for the known precursors to violence. Certain changes in language, patterns of engagement with specific toxic content, things that are publicly visible, but the key is what happens next. The response isn't a SWAT team breaking down the door.
Right, because if you send a SWAT team to a 19-year-old's house because he posted something angry online, you just confirmed his entire paranoid worldview that the state is out to get him.
You've just radicalized him further. You've pushed him over the edge. In this doctrine, the response is counseling and intervention. The JCTC systems might flag the risk, but it's a local intervention team that takes over.
Who would be on that team?
Maybe a respected scholar from his neighborhood, maybe a community leader, a psychologist. They reach out quietly, they talk to him, they talk to his family.
The goal, as the book says, is prevention without publicity.
That is the most elegant part of it. You solve the problem quietly before it ever becomes a problem. No headlines, no media panic. You turn the kid around, get him the help he needs, and the bomb never gets built. It's invisible success, which is the best kind.
Finally, scenario C, post-attack stabilization. Let's say, despite all the best efforts, the fused intel, the early detection something slips through, a bomb goes off in a marketplace, people are dead, it's a tragedy.
This is the moment of maximum danger for the society. The immediate goal shifts from prevention to community reassurance.
Usually in that moment, governments either go completely silent or they start rounding up everyone in sight.
Both of which are the absolute wrong moves. The doctrine calls for rapid investigations combined with transparent communication. You have to get on the airwaves immediately. The leadership has to be visible.
And tell people what?
Tell them what you know. Tell them what happened as soon as you can. Tell them who you believe did it. And most importantly, tell them what you're doing about it.
Why is that transparency so vital in that moment of pure chaos?
Because panic and misinformation thrive in the dark. If the government says nothing, the rumor mill starts churning within minutes. It was this sect. No, it was that ethnic group. The government did it themselves to justify a crackdown.
That's how you get riots.
That's how you get revenge killings and sectarian violence. By owning the narrative with the truth, the state keeps the temperature down. It keeps society from tearing itself apart.
In other words, it prevents the second victim, that societal breakdown we talked about at the start.
Exactly. It denies the terrorist their ultimate victory, which is never just the body count. It was the chaos that they hoped would follow.
This has been a massive, massive deep dive. We have walked through the failures of the past, the 4 pillars of this proposed future, the operational hub of the JCTC, the human element of rehabilitation, the strategic value of legitimacy, and how it might all work in practice.
It is a comprehensive blueprint. It's dense, there's no doubt about that. But the problem it's trying to solve is incredibly complex.
If you had to summarize the core message, the one single thing our listeners should take away from episode 38 of The Nuclear Umbrella, what would it be?
I would go back to the concluding principle that's found right at the end of the text. It says, security that preserves society lasts longer than security imposed by fear.
That is profound. You can impose security with a gun and a prison cell, but that security ends the moment you put the gun down.
Correct. But if you build security through resilience, through justice, through opportunity, and through community, that kind of security sustains itself. It becomes part of the social fabric.
And that, I suppose, is the ultimate goal of the Muslim NATO doctrine, as described by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir.
To defeat extremism without becoming what it fights. To protect the body of the ummah, as it were, without losing its soul.
A powerful look at a potential future. It really forces you and me and everyone listening to rethink what strength actually looks like in the 21st century. It's not just about firepower anymore, is it?
Not at all. It's about brain power, it's about willpower, and perhaps most of all, it's about moral power.
Well said. This has been a fascinating journey through this part of the nuclear umbrella. We really hope this deep dive gave you a new framework, a new way of thinking about these massive global challenges.
It was a pleasure to unpack all of this with you.
As always, we want to leave you with a thought. We've talked about these 4 pillars: precision kinetics, ideological neutralization, financial disruption, and community resilience. Mull this over. Which of those 4 do you think is the hardest one to actually achieve in the real world? Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Alamo.alaikum and Pakistan Zindabad.